Hello 382, welcome to today's lesson. All right, so in today's lesson, we'll be going through your end of year revision paper. Okay, it's not a full paper, it's just 4 questions for you to practice on and to familiarize yourself with the format of the EOY geography exams. Okay, so without further ado, you should have done your homework already. If you have not done your homework, please pause the video and complete your homework before coming back to this lesson. All right, and without further ado, I'll go through the answers with you guys. Okay, so for the first question, the question says, study figure 1, which shows the design of a non-sustainable neighborhood and a sustainable neighborhood. All right, so this is a very simple question whereby we give you a stimulus such as this, and then from the stimulus, you will be required to answer the question. Okay, you are supposed to extract some data from the stimulus, or either that or to look for clues within the stimulus itself to help you answer the question. All right. So in this case, they say that we have a design of a non-sustainable neighborhood and a sustainable neighborhood. And in this case, on your left would be the non-sustainable neighborhood, while the right is your sustainable neighborhood. Okay, so let us look at what the question and see what does it demand from us. So with reference to figure 1, okay, so you definitely need to make use of some things in figure 1. All right, then they ask you to describe. Okay, so the key command word over here is describe, and then the differences in between a sustainable and non-sustainable neighborhood. Okay, so they ask you to describe differences between both types of neighborhood. All right, so this is the focus. Now, so when we look at the stimulus, okay, we try to find differences in this case. What is different between the two neighborhood? Okay, and this question is worth 3 marks. So you are supposed to give 3 unique points. All right. So let us take a look at some possible answers in this case. So with reference to figure 1, all right, then what are some possible answers? Okay, so if we take a look over here, non-sustainable neighborhood relies more on private cars, while sustainable neighborhood relies more on alternative transport, such as bicycles. And then this will give you 1 mark, all right? So if I look at the picture, what do I see? I can see that actually the picture on my right, sorry, on my left, okay, you can see that, oh, there are a lot of people driving cars in this picture, and this actually releases carbon dioxide. All right. So in the sustainable neighborhood, instead of the usage of cars, it become the usage of bicycles for transport. Okay. So in that case, that is how I get my first point. So more on private cars, while sustainable neighborhood relies more on bicycles. All right, or in this case, they put here alternative transport. All right, so that would be worth 1 mark. Okay, and then you see there's this additional 1 mark over here, right? Basically, in this case, award 1 mark, 1 additional mark for further development of each description. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that if I have a point such as this, and then I elaborate on this point, I can get 1 more additional mark to a total of 2 marks. All right. Now, what other points can we extract from this picture? Okay, so if we look on your left side, all right, you will notice that this river over here is very polluted. However, on the right side, the river is cleaner. Okay, so that is one thing we can notice. This is a fish. Then all these are rubbish. Okay, so if we look at the houses, you can see all these houses are actually built without proper waste disposal. So that's why they throw all their trash into the river. However, in the right side, okay, all these houses are properly built, okay, and then they have proper waste disposable system, so they do not need to throw their trash into the river. Okay, and then if we look at the last picture, Now, the last picture is actually a bit different. So the last picture over here is showing that, oh, there is an earthquake. That's why you see a crack in the ground such as this. And then because of the earthquake, the buildings actually collapse. And when they rebuild the buildings, okay, they build it in a sustainable manner. All right. So the buildings on the right are actually safer, okay, and then it's protecting against earthquake. All right, but while the buildings on the left is not as safe, so during the earthquake event, they start to collapse. Okay, so these are some of the other observations. So when we look at what are some of the other possible answers, because we need a total of 3 answers. Okay, so we can also talk about the amount of green spaces. So non-sustainable neighborhood has lesser green spaces, while sustainable neighborhood has more green spaces, right? Then another point is the investment in eco-friendly features, such as the solar panels, to reduce burning of fossil fuel, okay, while non-sustainable neighborhood has no such effort. Okay, so if we look at the rooftop of the buildings, you can see that these buildings, the roofs are made of zinc and so on, while these buildings over here, the roof actually have solar panels. Okay, then the next thing I want to point out to you guys is that if you look over here, the first 4 points are all on environmental sustainability. Okay, then we have the next point is on economic sustainability. And finally, we have 2 other points on social sustainability. So in addition to looking out for separate points from the image such as this, okay, you should also try as far as possible to look out for separate concepts or separate ideas. All right. So in this case, we have 4 ideas on environmental sustainability, but we also try to look out for economic sustainability as well as social sustainability, such as what you have learned in class as well. So for economic sustainability, okay, they are talking about the population density to support the local businesses. All right. So if we look at the image, we can see that clearly the houses are being more concentrated in a sustainable neighborhood. So these houses are looking the same, but these houses over here, they are better built, okay, and then they allow more people to live in them. All right. And then if we look at the last box over here, okay, you can actually see that all these are high-rise flats. Okay. And then it also helps the shop to remain open. Okay. So that is why there is economic sustainability shown in this picture. So sufficient population density that support the local business. Okay. As to social sustainability, so non-sustainable neighborhood does not seem to create a sense of community. Okay, so no sense of community. While the sustainable neighborhood creates positive and resilient relationship between the residents. Okay, so you can see here the effect of the earthquake is being felt. Okay, but here they are working together to rebuild the city. All right. And then in a sustainable neighborhood, they also have well-maintained infrastructures, such as the roads, and the enables good connection from place to place. While in a non-sustainable neighborhood, okay, they may not have good connections between its amenities. All right. So this is a very simple question whereby you look at the stimulus over here and then you link it to your knowledge in the textbook. And in this case, we link it to the portion on what is a sustainable neighborhood and the characteristics of a sustainable neighborhood. All right. So these are the things, the related ideas to sustainability, to sustainable neighborhood. Okay, so that is for the first question. Very straightforward question. Now the second question, okay, this second question is related to your GI, all right, your geographical investigation, or now they call it geographical methods. Okay, So the typical question whereby you look at some data and then you try to make sense of it. So whenever you have given this kind of question, please pay close attention to the text in front over here, because this text actually give you details, or some would say the context of the GI. So they're telling you what is the student doing, and from there, you will use the information provided in the context over here to help you answer the question. All right. So they say that a group of Singapore students, they want to investigate whether the number of visits per week to the lake gardens affect the residents' sense of belonging. Okay. So the investigation focus is number of visits per week, and then affecting the sense of belonging. Okay. So in this case, if I were to come up with a hypothesis, okay, a possible hypothesis could be things, could be a statement such as the number of visit increases, okay, the sense of belonging increases, all right? Or as the number of visit increase, the sense of belonging decrease. So possible hypothesis in this case, let me type it out for you guys. Okay. As the number of visit increase, the residents' sense of belonging increase. Okay, so a hypothesis always have two variables, an independent variable and a dependent variable, as well as the relationship between both variables. Then the other one is the guiding question. In a guiding question, okay, I would ask, how does the number of visits affects the sense of belonging? So guiding question is always open-ended, while hypothesis is closed-ended. All right. So in this case, possible guiding question is, how does the number of visits affect the residents' sense of belonging? Okay, so they conducted their investigation at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday. So it's a weekday and it is in the morning. They approached every third visitors at the exits of Jurong Lake Garden. So basically they wait at the exits of the place, and then every third person that passed by them, they gave the questionnaire survey to the third visitor, all right? Then they check if the visitor live in the vicinity. So if they check if the person is a resident of the place, and they conducted a survey among 9 residents. So these are the 4 separate things that they do. 8 a.m. on a weekday, every third person that exits the Jurong Lake Garden, and then they check if the person they interview is a resident, and finally they conduct a survey among 9 residents, meaning that their sample size is 9. All right. So from there, they decided to plot a table. So the number of visits per week to Jurong Lake Garden and sense of belonging. So we can see resident A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way until H, and then the number of visits per week. Okay, this guy, I don't know how he visits 10 times a week now, but okay, we just take it as that. And then the sense of belonging on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the strong sense of belonging. Okay, so when you see this, number 1, you would understand that, oh, this person has a very strong sense of belonging to the place. Okay, so with reference to the table, evaluate the validity of the student findings. So with reference, you might have to make use of this table. Okay, evaluate. The command word evaluate always requires you to give both sides. All right, so you have to say both, in this case, valid or if it invalid. All right. So validity of the students' findings with regards to their investigation. Okay. So you would say valid why it is valid, and then you will say why it is invalid, right? So evaluate, give both sides. Now, when we say valid, basically we are looking at the accuracy and reliability, all right? So the question is asking you if the student's findings are accurate or reliable. Okay, so let us look at the possible answers. Now you have to show both sides, right? So we have answers for why it is valid as well as why it is invalid. So the data collect addresses the investigation topic. Okay, so this is a key point. It addresses the topic because they want to find out if the number of visits per week affects the sense of belonging, right? So if we look at the table 1, we see that table 1 do ask the residents how often they visit the place. So it helps them to answer their investigation focus. All right. So it's valid because it addresses the investigation topic. And then the additional mark for this point, okay, is the usage of the data. So highest number of 10 visits resulted in strong sense of belonging, while lowest number of 1 visit resulted in lowest sense of belonging. So the point is that it addresses the topic, and then the usage of the data from the table gives 1 additional mark. All right, so there are a total of 2 marks to be gained over here. Okay, oh, I forgot to tell you guys. So the mark scheme for this is total of 4 marks, 2 points on each side. All right. So the second point on validity is they make sure that only residents were selected. Okay, so as only residents were selected, this will mean that the point of view being collected is accurate. Right? So only residents were selected, accurately show the sense of belonging of residents. Okay. Basically, what this point is trying to say is that I do not interview people who do not live in the area because my investigation focus is only about the resident sense of belonging, right? So I have to ensure that I do not interview anyone else. Okay, so that is for the valid points. Now the invalid points is the sample size is too small. So it does not ensure the representativeness of residents. Okay, meaning that because I only interviewed 9 residents, right? It does not represent every resident in the population. Okay, so it does not represent what everyone else would answer. Okay, and then in this case, when doing sampling, a good sampling size to have would actually be about 30 to 40 people to sample. All right. So the sample size is too small to ensure representativeness of residents. Okay. And then another point that is on why it is invalid, right? So the findings may not be valid because the student did not ensure that there is a mix of respondent. Okay. So what does this mean? This why is the respondent being interviewed, okay, not having a mix? Because they only went on a weekday, okay, Wednesday at 8 a.m. So on a weekday 8 a.m., okay, most of the visitors would be who? they would be your elderly and retirees, because the adults and the children would be in school, and then the adults would actually be at work. Okay, so in that case, right, when I ask if the sense of belonging is being affected by number of visit, I'm only getting the views from the retirees. All right, so only people who are not working. So in this case, I do not have a mix of respondent from different age group, and therefore my data collected may not be representative of all the residents in the neighborhood. Okay, so to put it simply, when I collect the data this time round, I'm only collecting data from a single group of people. All right, so it doesn't show the views from all the other age group, and that is why this data collected may not be representative. Okay, so that is for the second question. Now for the third question. Okay, study figure 2 showing the pressure at different depth in the Earth's interior. Okay, so this is a line graph, all right? Just that instead of time at the bottom, I put here as depth, all right? But essentially, this is still a line graph. Okay, so using figure 2, describe the change in pressure at different depths in the Earth interior. All right, so let us look at what is the command word. So using figure 2, meaning that you have to use the values in the figure. All right, so describe change in pressure at different depth. Okay, so you have to say how does the pressure changes as the depth increases. So what are our possible description? This question is worth 2 marks. All right, so for the 2-mark question, you have to give 2 separate points. Okay, there's a typo error here. So you have to give 2 separate points and then award a maximum of 1 additional mark for further development of each point where applicable. Okay, so when I look at this graph, what can I observe? As the depth increases, meaning that as my depth goes from 0 all the way to 6,000 km, okay, I notice that the line, okay, the line actually goes up, and this line would represent the pressure. All right, so as the depth increases, the pressure also increase as well from 0 to 3.5 bars. All right, so the unit is actually stated over here. Okay, so when I state this relationship as x increase, as the depth increase, y increase, so the pressure increase, I will get 1 mark for this. And then when I quote the data, okay, I will get the second mark. So from 1,000 to 6,000, then from 0 to 3.5, I would get the second mark. Okay, so another observation that can be made is actually on the rate of pressure change. So if you look at the gradient of the graph, okay, you will notice that over here from 0 to 3 to about 2,800 kilometers, okay, the graph is actually rather gentle, or rather I would say that it is not too steep lah. So after that, when it goes into the core, the line actually becomes steeper, right? So I can see that the gradient of the line has changed, and therefore I know that the rate of change, okay, in other words, how fast does the pressure increase is actually changing, and in this case, it is getting faster and faster as I go from the mantle to the core. Okay, so the rate of pressure increase is not uniform. All right, so when the depth increased from 0 to 2009, pressure had a constant increase. However, when the depth increases from 2009 to 6,000 kilometers, okay, the pressure has a slower increase. Okay, so I can see that over here, in this area, the gradient is actually less steep. All right, then this part here would be more steep. So in this case, I think this is a typo error. It shouldn't be slower increase. It should be a faster increase because the gradient is actually steeper. Okay, now the last point I want to point out to you is that you see over here, there's the word mantle and there's the word here core, right? So basically what it means that, as well as this dotted line, okay? What it means is that any depth from 0 to 2009 up to this dotted line, okay, we are still in the mantle area, okay? But further than that, so from 2009 onwards to 6000, this would be in the core area. Okay, so this whole area would be in the core. Okay, so that is for question 2A. Now the last question, question 2B. Okay, question 2B is a world map showing the tectonic plate movement. Okay, so study figure 3, which shows a global tectonic map. Now, how do we make sense of this map? So we always look at the legend. Okay, number 1, legend. Number 2, the scale. All right, and then we see if there are any additional labeling. So over here, this patch of red color thing is called the spreading zone. All right, then the blue color areas, they call it the subduction zone. So you had learned before that the direction of plate movement, you only have 3 directions, right? You have convergence, divergence, as well as transform. So convergence is whereby the plates are moving towards each other. And you had also learned that when 2 plates are moving towards each other, okay, the denser plate will actually subduct into the earth. So the subduction zone, okay, is the area whereby subduction occurs. And this will also be the zone in which the plates are converging. Okay, they are moving towards each other. Now, the spreading zone, as per what the name says, it means that it's spreading. So it's moving further away from each other. So when 2 plates are moving away from each other, that would be your divergence plate boundary. All right. So if I look at this, the red line over here actually shows divergence. And then you can see that the arrows are moving away from each other as well. Okay, so if I look at this red boundary, in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, I can see that the arrows are moving away from each other. Then when I look at the convergent plate boundary, okay, at the subduction zone, I can see that the arrows, okay, if you follow my mouse, you can see that the arrows are pointing towards each other. All right. And then there's this box over here saying the collision zone. So collision zone simply means that the plates are banging against each other, are colliding against each other. So where's the collision zone? Okay, if you look at Eurasian plate over here and African plate. So this area, okay, this is actually the collision zone. All right, then we have other kind of plate boundaries as represented by the single line over here. Okay, so command word, they are asking you to use figure 3. So you need to use data from this figure, compare the direction of plate movement. Okay, so a comparison question would require you to make similarities and differences. Okay, comparison is always similarities and differences. So compare direction of plate movement, that is number 1. And then number 2 is the resultant landform at plate boundaries A and B. Okay, so they do not need you to like study every single portion of the map. You only need to focus on the boundaries of A and B. Okay, so this question is worth 3 marks. Basically, you have to make 3 comparisons. It can be similarity or differences, or a mixture of both similarities and differences. All right, so when I look at A, okay, I can clearly see that A is the spreading zone. And then when I look at B, okay, so B is in this area, which is on the continental plate. So there might be some difference related to that. Okay, so 1 mark for each comparison, to a maximum of 3 marks. Award 1 additional mark for further development of each explanation where applicable. Okay, so the first point, similarities. Okay, both are spreading zone. So you can see that both A and location B, they are along this red color portion, right? So both are spreading zone. That is 1 mark. Okay, and it also means divergent plate boundaries, right? Then the additional mark is to quote the data from the picture as a evidence. So plate boundary A is between Indo-Australian and the Antarctic plate, while B is formed within the African plate. Okay, so you can see that this line over here is in African plate itself. So we say within the African plate. All right. Now, point number 2. So plate boundary A is an oceanic divergent plate boundary, while B is a continental divergent plate boundary. So now I'm comparing a difference already. All right. So A is OO, B is CC. Okay, so if I look back at the diagram, I can clearly see that at location A, okay, Indo-Australian plate, this line is passing through the ocean. So it's actually passing through this area, the Indian Ocean. Then along this area, okay, the Antarctic plate is this whole plate, right? This is also the blue portion, which is also part of the Southern Ocean. So this whole line is actually stretching across ocean. That is how I know that it is along the oceanic OO plate boundary. Okay. Now, when I look at B, so B, the line is actually stretching across the continent of Africa. Right now, where my mouse is, this is the continent of Africa. So I can see that this line is on Africa itself, is within Africa itself. So the splitting up of Africa would be a continental divergent plate boundary. Okay. And finally, the last comparison I can make, because the question is asking you and the resultant landforms, right? So when two plates move apart, okay, what is common between the resultant landform? It would actually be volcanoes. So both of them form volcanoes. So when the plate move apart, there's a decrease in overlying pressure. So that is my elaboration. Causes parts of the underlying mantle to melt to form magma, and then it rises through the weak cracks in the surface to form volcanoes. Okay, so in this case, my comparison, I have 3 separate points. 2 of them would be a point on the similarities. Then the last one would be the difference. Okay, so similarity. Okay, maybe let me put it this way, similarity. Then over here, this one would be the differences. Okay, so learning point over here is that when we are talking about comparison, okay, the command word comparison, we look at both similarities and then we look at differences. Right, and then also there's a little bit of recap on the plate tectonic movement, as well as the how to make use of a map like this. Okay, so you make use of this map, you can look at the key, all right, or the legend, and then you look at the scale. So I know this is a global map because a short distance as such is actually 3,000 kilometers apart already. Okay, so with that, we have come to the end of this practice. Please go back and look through the answers again. I will upload both the answers and the question paper to Google Classroom so you can review it at your own time as well. Okay, and then lastly, I want you guys to also review this video if you need to, and then feel free to always rewind back and watch any part which you are unsure about again. All right. So with that, I have nothing else for you guys. Hope you had an enjoyable lesson today. All right. Thank you and goodbye. Bye.